Welcome to Living Well with MS Coffee Break, a part of the Living Well with MS podcast family from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, celebrating its 10th year of serving the MS community. I'm your host, Jeff Alex. Today, you'll meet someone living with MS from our diverse and global Overcoming MS community. Our Coffee Break series invites you into the lives of each guest. They share their personal MS journeys and speak openly about their challenges and victories, large and small. We hope you find some common cause and a source of inspiration from the stories of these very special people. You can check out our show notes for more information and useful links. You can find these on our website at overcomingms.org/podcast. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word about us on your social media channels or leave a review wherever you tune into our podcast. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to Living Well with MS on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. So, get your favourite beverage ready and let's meet today's guest on Living Well with MS Coffee Break. Welcome to Living Well with MS Coffee Break number 28, where we are pleased to welcome Claes Nermark as our guest. Claes lives in Sweden, he is happily married to Malin, and they have 3 grown children. At university, Claes trained to become a physical education and biology teacher. In addition to teaching, he has added the following skills to his CV: software trainer, fitness and yoga instructor, event manager, sports club administrator, operations manager, vice principal, and employee wellness manager. Claes, welcome to the Living Well with MS Coffee Break. We're so pleased to have you on our programme. The purpose of this series is to better get to know some of the members of the community from around the world. And today you're in the hot seat. So could you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day life?
Well, of course, great being here. Today I'm doing the final trainings to become a personal trainer. And, it's quite a bit of a study right now and starting up my business, being a public speaker and doing the training at the same time. So I have in my days busy starting up the new year.
And when were you diagnosed with MS? Could you tell us a bit about that and how you initially dealt with it?
Yep. Let's go back to May 2010. Very busy time in my life. I was transitioning from an administrative position at a huge sports club in Sweden into a startup in education about holistic health. So for a couple of days, I was simultaneously doing more or less 2 jobs, commuting like an hour down south for meetings at my old job in Malmö, 2 hours in the car up north to meetings with my new managers in Halmstad, and an hour back home. Probably did some workout on the evening, and then next morning down to Malmö, up to Halmstad, and when I got into the car, I suddenly had double vision. But if I held my head a little to the right, it almost narrowed to one road, so I was just freeway 1 hour back home, and like 2 takeoffs from the freeway I was back home. And sitting at the dinner table, my wife said, "Well, you have to see the doctor. This is no good." I said, "Well, I'm so busy, not tomorrow." And she said, "Maybe next week." So, "No, I'm this been." "Well, wait, please call the advice line at least." So I did. I called the advice line and I said, "Hi, my name is Claes and I have this double vision out of nowhere." And my wife reminded me before making the call, "Do tell them you had a stroke 8 years ago." So I said, "Okay, and I had a stroke 8 years ago, so what's your suggestion?" And they said, "I think you should call an ambulance and come in right away." And that was quite a bit different from my view of not having time to see the doctor the next day nor the next week, but my wife took me there. And they did all sorts of regular neurological scans and a regular X-ray. And I was a fully fit man, and they didn't find anything wrong with me. And they said, "Well, you may stay the night. You might get an return appointment for an MR scan during the weekend." And with my double vision, I realized I couldn't do much of a proper job the day after anyway. So I stayed the night and got an appointment for an MR scan. And it turned out I have active lesions in my brain. And the doctor said, "This is one sign of multiple sclerosis, and we would like to make a lumbar puncture as well." to roll out some other alternatives. So I had that one done as well, and I found 1 out of 2 indicators for MS, and I got the preliminary diagnosis, and straight away I got onto intravenous cortisone, and stayed for a few days, got very tired, and got back home and slept for days, actually. And I was kind of lucky because I didn't have any experience of knowing anyone with MS. So I didn't have any real picture of what MS really meant. Because I was so focused on getting into my new job. So it was kind of, okay, let's fix this so I can get on with my life. But my wife had quite another vision because her grandma ended her life in a wheelchair due to MS. So that was her picture of having MS. And seeing me going down that route was not a good future scenario for our family and things. So she said, okay, you're not a good reader with your double vision. I'll scan what I can find and I'll order some books. And she got tons of books and started reading. And I just, I was on sick leave as I couldn't do much. It was just tiring walking and doing things. If I just walk down the path, okay, should I take the right or the left one with my double vision? Once in a while I used a patch for one eye to kind of ease off the double vision and things like that, but it was a very tiresome, but luckily I never got afraid of getting the MS diagnosis. We've been working a lot with mental training and doing visualization and things for sports events and doing various things in life. So that's one thing I've used before. So my diagnosis was then in 2010. But looking in the rearview mirror, the stroke I mentioned from 2002 was another very hectic period in my life when I was working more than full-time as an event manager, trying to be the best dad and husband ever at the same time. I ended up with optic neuritis. But I mean, back then they did all sorts of examinations, but it took like 6-7 weeks until I got to do the MR scan. And when that result came back, they found one scar or lesion, probably a scar as it was weeks later, that was situated just before the optic nerve divided into each eye. And my optic neuritis was very similar to both eyes, and they said, okay, we diagnosed this as a stroke. But some years ago, I got to read all my old journals. And in that journal from 2002, there was a little note, multiple sclerosis, ? But as they found this scar and my vision was back to normal weeks later, no other symptoms, I got the diagnosis stroke. And then again, between 2002 and 2010, I had other like numbness starting in my toes, slowly reaching just mid-thigh, and before it was turning back, I went to an acupuncturist and to treat this weird thing, and I had tingling in my hands and things like that during these years up to my official diagnosis in 2010. So officially I was diagnosed in 2010, but probably I had my MS debut in 2002 with the optic neuritis.
And you probably never had a stroke?
Probably not.
That's fascinating when you say, because you look very incredibly fit and well, and you think that you don't look like someone who's had a stroke, and but actually that's amazing that actually looking back. I was just 40 years old, having a stroke, being a fitness instructor, etc. Didn't really come along with what I knew about fitness and health. Even though I now know a lot more. So if I hadn't got my MS diagnosis in 2010, I would most likely have the opportunity to have a stroke or something similar
later in life due to the lifestyle I had back then. I thought it was healthy, but wow, I've learned a lot since.
Yeah, no, likewise. I thought because I was slim and I could run a long way, I was healthy. I could
yep.
I could eat anything as long as I burnt off the calories by doing exercise.
Yep.
It was my thinking. Anyway, when did you come across OMS, and why did you decide to follow the OMS program?
Well, luckily, one of the books Malin, my wife, found when scanning the market was the Overcoming MS, the big book by George. So she started reading it, and we started, I'd actually say we, because she was on the same journey from the very beginning. So we adopted most of it at once. But not most of it, as she bought more books. There were other alternatives. So on top of the OMS program, we we took gluten away, and God knows what else we had to take away or adopt. So for the first couple of months, we kind of opened the fridge and said, there's nothing we can eat. But slowly we realized, okay, probably the OMS program is the one to trust. And we went more and more into that one. Even though there were some things, I mean, we've been into raw food for a while before my diagnosis. So we used a lot of coconut oil and cold-pressed coconut oil, and we've read all about the benefits about that one. But then again, it's all fats. And okay, but we keep that one because we've heard from other sources that that's a good thing. Along with dark chocolate with all the antioxidants, that's got to be good for you. So we kept the dark chocolate. So we were probably like 90+% onto the program. And as we've been in New Zealand for almost a year with the kids when they were small, Malin found out about the retreats, mainly in Australia and New Zealand. We thought, that's a good reason to go back to New Zealand. So I wrote down to the Golder Foundation, I think it's called, and asked, okay, when are the next retreats scheduled for New Zealand? So I could see if I could get some funding from some grants or something here in Sweden to support the trip. And I got some dates, but just maybe a month or so after, I got an email saying, hey, you've shown interest in our retreats down under. And we've just decided to set up the first in the Northern Hemisphere. So you've got another 2 weeks to decide whether you want one of these early bird applications. And I just told Malin, well, we just have to go. We can't miss this opportunity. So in 2013, we were among the lucky ones getting into the Launch Abbey retreat. We refer to it as that is our kind of a second family that built up during that week. So it was a week with George and Craig Hassard and his wife Sandra, the yoga instructor, and some other amazing people. And I mean, I think we were about 35 people with MS, primary progressive, and like me, relapsing, remitting, and maybe 10 partners coming along as well. And we actually lived the program for a week. I mean, we had a retreat for ourselves, so they've set up all the menus and things like that. And George went through everything from medications to meditations. And a lot of the research backing up all the claims in the book. And that way, I mean, I talked to George and asked, so, but what about this coconut oil? I said, well, he said, well, it's saturated fats, but I haven't found any studies separating animal or nature's vegetable fats. And as I haven't found any studies proving it's safe, I choose not to be the guinea pig. And I was like, kind of good point of view. And seeing George being so vital, fully fit, no signs of MS whatsoever, I realized, okay, let's drop the coconut oil. And we actually dropped the chocolate at that point. So from that retreat, we really have a true believing in the OMS program.
Yeah, it's true that the saturated fats from plant sources, we just don't know, do we? And it's just one of those things that hopefully there'll be more research, because they know it is different. There are big chemical differences between coconut oil and meat fat.
Yeah.
But like you say, do you really want to be the guinea pig to find out if it's okay or not? And so maybe in the future we will be having coconut oil and we will be having chocolate. But yeah.
I mean, there are many nuts and seeds containing lots of fats as well, even though they've got other fats. So, but it's not fat alone. So it comes with a combination with other good things as well.
Yeah. And I've heard people actually have a very small amount of chocolate, a very dark chocolate, because there's benefits of chocolate, and so they weigh it up. But yeah, it's very difficult, and hopefully there will be in the future more research, because the more I think it's becoming normalised that diet and lifestyle has a factor, then hopefully there'll be more research done. But it's difficult because the drug companies clearly aren't going to pay lots of money for lifestyle factors.
No, for that kind of studies. No, unfortunately, no.
And you mentioned that you had a very stressful life. How do you manage stress now that you've been diagnosed?
Well, in the beginning it was just doing nothing for a while. But then I gradually managed to get into meditation. And I think I managed to do that thanks to taking a Qigong course. My wife read an article about a guy saying now he dares to hold his daughter, because he got his MS diagnosis when his daughter was born, and he got motor malfunction in his arms. So he really didn't dare to hold his daughter. I went on a Qigong course and got enormous benefits out of that one. So I joined the same organization and went for a weekend and started doing Qigong like 20, 30 minutes almost daily. And that was one way for me to actually more or less do nothing, even if you do slow, very dedicated movements during a Qigong session. Before that, I had a hard time just sitting still for 5 minutes. But since then, I've been adding it on, and since, well, it's, I'd say a couple of years now. I don't know when it really got into habit. So I start my day getting out of bed into my kind of yoga or meditation sofa and sit for 20, 25 minutes before taking a glass of lemon water and taking like 25, 30, 45 minute morning walk, depending on the weather, before having breakfast. So I start my day in a very relaxed way. So out of sleep into meditation, setting up myself for a stress-free day. And I think this is the key to being so much more aware of where I am right now in every day. So nowadays I can so much earlier realize like, okay, there's a lot of things going on right now. How can I stop this stressful cycle coming up? So realizing, okay, like yesterday I had my yoga class, and then I had one meeting, and then I should have my Sunday chat with my brothers spread out in the world. And I realized coming into the afternoon, like, okay, I don't have time for that meeting before meeting my brothers. So I just canceled that meeting. And it was like, So actually one thing, I've learned a magic word since my diagnosis. It's not a 4-letter word, it's a 2-letter word, and it's spelled N-O. So I've learned to say no to things, even though they're very exciting things. I really have to see what's in my calendar. Could I add this one as well? Because I am an active person. I used to have a laser focus in my calendar way back when we all had paper calendars. someone could ask, oh, could you help out with this fitness class on Wednesday? So, okay, what week? Okay, next week. And then narrow down, okay, what day? Okay, Wednesday. Okay, what time? And then squared in the hour for the class. Yeah, there's nothing in my calendar. And I could have like one class the day before, or have one class in the morning, and all other sorts of things. But no, that was perfectly fine. I could squeeze that in as well. But nowadays I realize if I say no to some things, I can say yes to my health. I can say yes to my partner. I can say yes to my family. And that is so much more important than pleasing everyone else. Because that way I will be for a long run, and that way I can please more people in the long run than pleasing everyone right now.
That's a fantastic way of looking at it. I think it was actually my neurological physio who said to me it's a similar thing, but he said you just need to consider that you're not an ambulance driver or a fireman. And so you can be late for things, or you can say, no, I'm not doing things, and it won't actually cause a problem. He said, if you don't do something, if you say, no, I'm not going to do that, what's the worst that can happen? Or if you're 5 minutes late for a meeting, what's the worst that will happen? He said, if you're doing something that's critical, like if you're an emergency paramedic, then yes, you need to do that thing, and you need to do it right now.
You have to be there.
But you're not. So, and then you think, actually, because there are people I know who are always late to things, and you think, oh, they're always late, but actually it doesn't matter, and they don't get stressed about it, and you think, okay, just don't get too stressed about things. Did you have any problems adopting OMS? What parts of the program did you have any trouble with?
Well, the problem in the beginning was actually that we did more than the OMS program. I was once again lucky because we attended the Unleash the Power Within seminar with Tony Robbins in London 2007. And the fourth day in that seminar is called Living Health. And at the end, we got a 10-day challenge, quitting, I think it was meat and dairy for 10 days. And I was definitely a meat eater, and I love dairy, yogurt. So it was a challenge for me. But my wife's been a pescatarian since she was 16 or something. So it was her almost everyday life, but it was a challenge to me. And I said, okay, I can do this for 10 days. But after 10 days, I realized my stomach wasn't as upset and weird as it used to be. And I didn't have this lack of energy in the afternoon, having to have that afternoon snack or something. I thought, well, could this really be it? I mean, for 10 days, not having meat or dairy. So I thought, well, but if it is, I'll try a little bit more. And I haven't had meat since. And I actually got back to having dairy when it was present in whatever kind of food you were out in a restaurant or seeing friends. And I used to have some yogurt because I believed in beneficial bacteria in yogurt and things like that. So I've taken huge steps towards the OMS diet in 2007. So the diet thing wasn't that much of a giant step for me. It wasn't a total turnaround of my everyday diet. So the most challenging thing I'd say was actually the meditation part. As I said, I had a hard time just being restful for more than a few minutes. I had to move around and things like that. But now, I mean, half an hour, no problem.
And when did you start to see positive benefits of the OMS program? And what were those?
I'd say in a weird way after about 6 months, because my vision went back to normal like 6-7 weeks. And I was all fine until I think it was the Christmas day or something. I got some weird senses in my eyes again. And the day after, it was a full-blown double vision. And I thought, oh no, this doesn't work. I went to the emergency, got to see a neurologist. Well, most likely a relapse, so let's get you on cortisol, intravenous cortisol. But we've read the book and read about taking it orally in pills instead of intravenous. That way you could take it at night, adding on to the natural cortisol that your body is producing. And I asked, well, is it possible to get it as pills, as we had plans to go to see relatives for New Year's in Stockholm? And she said, well, if we have it. So she had to find out whether they had the option to give it as pills, but they did. So I got a prescription for a 5-day cure. I took them at night, even though the prescription said take them in the morning, so it will not disturb your nighttime sleep. But I followed the suggestions in the OMS. And went to Stockholm, was a bit discouraged about the OMS program not working, as it was definitely a full-blown double vision like at the diagnosis in May. But after 3 days, I thought, I feel a little bit better today. I mean, we were out, the crazy Christmas, or in between Christmas, New Year shopping with all the sales and things. It was kind of chaotic walking on the sidewalk with a double vision. I mean, it's enough people on a regular day, but the double vision, that was stressful. But the third day on that 5-day cure, I realized it feels a little bit better. But I said, no, I can't be. I mean, it took like 2 months last time, so no, it's just an illusion. But the day after, I felt even a little bit better, like, that's almost normal. And the 5th day, we were driving back home, or actually my wife was driving back home, but I felt like my double vision is gone. So I sat in the passenger seat pretending to be a driver, like looking in the rear view mirror, see, could this really be? Could this really be? After an hour or so, we went for just a meal break, and I said to Molly, well, you might not believe me, but my double vision is gone. Is it okay for you if I drive for a little while and make sure it's okay? Because I've been sitting here as a co-pilot for the first hour of the drive. And she said, well, I mean, it's just a freeway. I mean, you don't have to overtake anyone. So, but I drove nonstop for 2 hours, nothing coming back, and double vision didn't come back. And then I realized, okay, first time it took 8 weeks or 7 or 8 weeks for my double vision to disappear. Now I've been on this program for 6 months, and I'm taking those pills at night instead of intravenous, etc. Maybe that helped me to get back so much quicker. And I took that as a true sign of it is something happening here. So from that, I mean, getting the double vision again was really a backlash, but after 5 days, getting back to normal so quickly, I took really as a sign that something is happening. And I continue to have a few more relapses, a few connection with my sight and tingling in my hands and like that for about 3 years from diagnosis. So during the year when we went to the retreat, and I remember George saying it's usually between maybe 2 to 4 years before you see full results from being on the program. Because, I mean, every single day or every single minute, you are renewing yourself. I mean, sitting here talking, cells are dying in our bodies and new cells are created. But if you feed them good building material, they're not building out of old crap, because you're building a new body with good, solid, proper, natural material that will not kind of trigger things that might cause disease. And I've now been relapse-free since almost 9 years now, so it's amazing.
And you're the ambassador for the OMS Circle in Sweden. So could you tell us a bit about the OMS Circle there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from this family of friends from the Lund Abbey retreat. I heard about their circles and their meeting people, but in Sweden, I didn't meet anyone, and OMS wasn't present at all in Sweden. So I said, okay, let's see what happens. But during the pandemic, I, by friends of a friend, got to meet a guy that was newly diagnosed. He was a carpenter, but was on sick leave. He was very low in energy. And I just gave him some starting advice on getting onto OMS on top of his medication, because he was, of course, on disease-modifying drugs, as everyone else in Sweden, as the first route of treatment, or rather the only route of treatment if you're not aware of OMS. And then I talked to him a couple of months later, and he was just a new person. he was so full of energy and was so grateful for whatever advice I've given him, and he was back to working half-time and things like that. I realized, and at that moment, they were talking about the OMS online circles, and I said, okay, we can actually meet online. We don't have to meet in person. So I contacted OMS and said, I'd like to be an ambassador, but I have to start up digital to spread in Sweden. I mean, it's a tall country, and we're spread out, and there's not much knowledge about it. Started about almost a year ago, and we're only about, I think we're about 10 persons now, and I've just met 3 of them in real life. Otherwise, we've just met digitally. And one thing they have to say in common, here you can get some hope compared with other Facebook groups or MS groups. It's kind of, you meet and discuss your problems. You never meet and discuss your opportunities. And I mean, I'd say OMS is really an organization of hope and possibilities.
And you're contributor to the newly published Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis Handbook. So could you tell us a bit about your contribution to that?
Well, I got the honor to write my personal story about exercise. And I was a lucky one because I was fairly fit when I got the diagnosis. So when I got back from my relapses, I could fairly quickly get back to more or less normal fitness routines. But I realized now becoming a personal trainer, the word exercise is to many people challenging. So now when I think about it, it's kind of sad. The chapter is called exercise instead of movement, because what every person needs is getting out of inactivity. And everyone more or less can move at their level. So I mean, even if you've got MS sitting in a wheelchair, if you can push yourself around, do that, because that will get your heart rate up a little bit and help pushing things around in your body that helps you heal as well. So if you can walk, do walk. If you can run, well, for all sakes, continue running or biking or swimming, whatever. But I mean, sometimes people said, oh, I have to exercise. And just the word have to and exercise, it's not a good combination. And then they want it so much and they listen to so many others, and it's a must, and it becomes a stress. And stress is no good for, well, not anyone, especially for us with MS, obviously. But that way, we should talk more about movement. And my idea or my suggestion is, whatever you can move, keep moving it, because our bodies are so exceptionally clever. They adapt to what you do and what demands you put on your body. And if you put the demand of lying down on the couch, the body's clever. Oh, I don't have to have this capacity to move around as I'm not moving around. But once you start moving around, your heart and everything starts to adopt. There are healing processes of movement. And once you get into a decent amount of movement, maybe then you get enough energy to exercise as well.
So thank you so much for being on the Living Well with MS Coffee Break and allowing the community to get to know one of its own members a bit better. So one last question before you go. We have a tradition to try and tap into your experience of MS and specifically OMS. And could you give a piece of wisdom to maybe help people who are newly diagnosed better adopt the program?
I'd say I have 2 pieces of advice. First, I'd like to quote quite a famous sports brand in the world and say, just do it. Because, I mean, in the Facebook group for the newly diagnosed, they come in and say, well, maybe I should wait a little, and then people jump in, start right now. Because the sooner you start, the sooner you will reap some benefits. I mean, as it will probably take a couple of years before you have full-blown effect of whatever you do with the OMS program. So just do it, get into it. But on the same note, do not do it all at once. That might be overwhelmed. So when I get a newly diagnosed, I just make sure you add good things like the flaxseed oil and check your vitamin D levels. That way they can add good things without taking anything away. It's not a threat. It's not a turnaround of your life or anything like that. Becoming a trained health coach, they talked about crowd out. So you add good things instead of focusing on taking things out. So if you add good things and add good habits, suddenly the old bad habits, they are just crowded out of your life. So step by step, but just do it.
Thank you very much for that. And Claes, thank you for joining us on the OMS Living Well with MS Coffee Break.
Thank you. It's an honor being on the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS Coffee Break. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find all sorts of useful links and bonus information there. Do you have questions about this episode, or do you or someone you know want to be featured in a future Coffee Break episode? Then email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. You can also subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Living Well with MS Coffee Break is kindly supported by a grant from the Happy Charitable Trust. If you'd like to support the Overcoming MS charity and help keep our podcast advertising free, you can donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. To learn more about Overcoming MS and its array of free content and programs, including webinars, recipes, exercise guides, OMS circles, our global network of community support groups, and more, please visit our website at overcomingms.org. While you're there, don't forget to register for our monthly e-newsletter so you can stay informed about the podcast and other news and updates from Overcoming MS. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time.